I'm Deborah Bogar, facilitator for this one-hour NACD Urban and Community Conservation webinar on evaluating the potential for water savings in urban outdoor irrigation. This webinar is being recorded and will be posted on NACD's website along with a presentation PDF for your future access. Everyone should be connected online to see the presentation, and you can access audio via your computer or by phone. Those directions were sent with your confirmation email. As this opening slide indicates, all lines are muted except for the speakers. I'll open the chat area after the presentation so you can type in your questions and comments, and we'll take as many as we can. You might want to jot those down during the presentation. In this webinar system, the transitions will take a few seconds as the slides load, so don't worry that it's your computer. We'll start with comments from our host, Ron Rohal, Chair of NACD's Urban and Community Resource Policy Group, which is a subcommittee of our Natural Resource Policy Committee. Ron?
And good morning, and I welcome all of you to the monthly Urban and Community Conservation webinars offered by the National Association of Conservation Districts through the support of our sole sponsor, the Scotts Miracle-Gro Company. These sessions are designed by NACD's Urban and Community Resource Policy Group, a subcommittee of district officials and partners charged with guiding the association's services and support for districts' work in developed and developing areas. Our goal through these webinars is to help districts share what they are doing nationwide and enable them to learn from each other and various agencies and organizations. And we appreciate the support of the Scotts Miracle-Gro Company for making them possible. I invite you to let us know what you think about each webinar and what other topics you would like us to cover by contacting NACD staffer Deb Bogar. And please tell your NACD officers what type of assistance you would like from our National Association for your urban and community conservation work. Now I'll turn it over to Deb for the introduction of our speakers.
All right, thank you, Ron.
You're welcome.
Today we have one presentation with also introductory comments. Carol Kaufman-Nowlin has devoted her career to environmental and social responsibility with a special focus on water quality and equity of access. In her current role as manager for corporate social responsibility with Scotts Miracle-Gro, she manages sustainability reporting and disclosures, advises the business on environmental and social issues, and leads grant making in the areas of environmental stewardship and community enhancement. Carol also serves on the board of the Ohio Environmental Council and as an appointee to the City of Bexley's Environmental Sustainability Advisory Council. Bill Christensen is the Director of Programs at the Alliance for Water Efficiency. Bill has been in the water industry since 2002 when he got his start working for Planning and Management Consultants Ltd. in Carbondale, Illinois. Bill joined the Alliance for Water Efficiency in 2007, where his work has included research related to many facets of water resource management, such as policy analysis, water conservation planning and evaluation, benefit cost analysis, drought planning, and water rate evaluation. He has worked with water utilities throughout the United States and Canada. And with that, Carol and Bill, I'm going to load the slides. And when they come up on your screen, Carol, I believe you're going to do the introductory comments, so if you want to take it from there.
All right, that sounds great. Thanks, Deb. Hello, everyone who's joining us from around the country. I just wanted to give a few brief comments and say welcome from the Scotts Miracle-Gro Foundation. Our company, as some of you may know, was founded way back in 1868 here in Marysville, Ohio, where we're still headquartered today. That's about 15 minutes outside of the Columbus metro area. And our company really has a long legacy of giving back and doing the right thing. The founder of Miracle-Gro, Horace Hagedorn, famously said, "You can't keep taking from the earth, you have to give something back. And so we've really taken that to heart, both through the company and its way of operating and investing in local communities where we operate, and really working hard to develop products that are good for the environment and help people to engage with the natural world in productive ways. And then also, more recently in 2017, by founding the Scotts Miracle-Gro Foundation to really formalize our giving priorities and further develop our relationships with organizations all across the country who are doing important and vital work that we support. And so we have 3 pillars of giving through the Scotts Miracle-Gro Foundation. First, we have environmental giving and partners that are doing work in water stewardship, which includes combating harmful algal blooms and nutrient pollution, as well as water conservation and efficiency, which we'll talk more about today, and also pollinator protection programming around the country. Secondly, we have a community enhancement pillar, which includes gardens and green spaces in places like urban neighborhoods, in rural communities, schools, community organizations. So beautifying the environment and producing food and other kinds of beneficial garden and green space development. And then the third pillar of giving through the foundation is our youth empowerment program. As I mentioned, the environmental giving is a big part of what we commit to, and we have a very active national partner network with 16 members that are working on water stewardship issues at local and regional levels. And you can see this is a map of where these partners are located. And I know it's a little bit small on the screen, but those in the lower left-hand side of the map are those with a national reach, and that does include the National Association of Conservation Districts and the Alliance for Water Efficiency. So we do have annual meetings of this network at different host locations around the country. We have met on Long Island. We've been in Florida. Last year we were in the Chesapeake Bay, and this year we will go to the Galveston Bay, where we get to meet and really exchange ideas. Similar kind of goal as this monthly webinar is getting people together to share what they're working on, what their challenges and successes are, and see how we can all work together to advance important conservation issues. So Scotts really does have a long history of partnership with NACD and with local and state conservation districts. In fact, this partnership goes back to about 10 years, and we are really proud that we continue to be the sponsor for this urban and community conservation webinar series since 2013. As I mentioned, the Alliance for Water Efficiency is another longtime partner of ours and a member of our partner network that's doing important work focused on water conservation and efficiency. And Bill will tell you more about AWE and its unique role in the water sector. It includes research, best practice sharing, and program design for nearly 500 members nationwide. So I'm really excited that we were able to bring Bill and AWE here today to share some of their recent research in the past several years on water efficiency, and I think it will be highly relevant for districts that want to share their own best practices and tailor water stewardship programming to the unique needs in their areas. So with that, I am going to turn it over to you, Bill.
All right. Good morning, everyone, or good afternoon, depending on where you are in the country. And thank you, Ron, Deb, and Carol, for getting this going and for having me here today to talk about our outdoor water savings research initiative. So just to kind of reintroduce myself, my name is Bill Christensen, and I'm the Director of Programs for the Alliance for Water Efficiency. And we are a nonprofit organization based in Chicago, Illinois, and our mission is to promote the efficient and sustainable use of water. We have about 450 members throughout North America, and that covers 200 watersheds, and a lot of our members are water utilities, and collectively they deliver water to over 50 million water customers. So we have a very far reach. We have a wonderful network, and we carry out our mission through conducting research, developing resources and tools, providing training and education. We do quite a bit of policy advocacy, and maybe most importantly, what we do is create peer networking. So we bring our network together. It's comprised of stakeholders with a lot of different perspectives. I mentioned we have water utilities as one of our largest members, but we have folks from business and industry, plumbing equipment manufacturers, academics, local government, state government, you name it. If people are into water and water efficiency, they tend to be part of our network. And so when we do something like conduct research or are looking at policy we want to advocate for, we have all these great perspectives at the table and a lot of different voices. So we do things in a very well-rounded way with everybody's priorities in mind. So part of our 2030 sustainable water vision is efficiency first. And we want homeowners and businesses to be smart water users. We want them to know and appreciate the value of water, have access to real-time information, and also have access to technologies that help them save water, both indoors and outdoors. And today I'm largely going to be talking about outdoor water use via our Outdoor Water Savings Research Initiative. And part of our strategic plan and our vision is that we have to reduce outdoor water use. It's largely misunderstood compared to indoor water use. It's also not as regulated as indoor water use. Our toilets and clothes washers have consumption specifications attached to them. And outdoor typically doesn't have the same type of regulation. We feel outdoor water use is just ripe for innovation and improvement, and that's for us, the consumers, you know, when we're at our homes using water, but also the landscape contractors out there and designers that we can, you know, create more of an efficiency mindset. And I just want to say, when I'm talking about outdoor water use and irrigation today, I'm not talking about agriculture and agricultural water use. I'm talking about how we, at our homes and businesses, irrigate our lawns and yards, and how we use water on a day-to-day basis. So why is outdoor water use important? Why is this such an important topic and makes up such a large part of our strategic plan? Well, it represents a very large use of water. The chart in the lower right-hand part of this slide is from Los Angeles. And if you look at the first bar on the left-hand side of that chart, it shows that outdoor water use makes up 54% of their single-family customers' water use. So collectively, all their single-family customers use more than half of their water outside. So it's a very large use. And because it just kind of disappears into the ground, it's hard for us to understand that. The flow rates, if you know you're using a hose or a sprinkler, are quite high, and it's difficult to know how much water is being used outside. It's also important because it's a key driver of our peak season water use. And we build our water systems for our communities to meet that peak use. And oftentimes, the community will have to expand their system because water use is increasing with growth, etc. And if we can lower our outdoor water use, we can avoid having to expand our systems. And those expansions, when we build capacity, are very expensive and cost our ratepayers a lot of money. So if we can lower our peak use, over time, we can lower our customers' water bills and use less water. Outdoor water use also places a heavy demand on water supplies when they're likely already being stressed by hot and dry weather. That's when we use water on our lawns, is when it's hot and dry. We use water for irrigation during the summer months, and our water supplies might be getting stressed at that same time, so it kind of double stresses our supplies, if you will. It's also very complex and variable when compared to indoor water use. Indoor water use is relatively homogeneous. If you looked at two similar houses with, the same number of people living in them, there's a good chance their water use is fairly similar. But on the outdoor side of things, there's things like behavior. If you compared those two houses, they may water their lawns very differently. They may have different irrigation equipment. And then weather plays a huge role in this. You have some years that are very wet, and you get a lot of rain. I know last year here in the Chicagoland area, it rained so much, I didn't have to water my lawn at all the whole season, and my water utility didn't get as much sales that year. Whereas if we had a hot, dry year, you end up using a lot more water. So it adds a lot of variability to a system's consumption. And then things like lot size, plant type, and the presence of irrigation equipment. If there's an in-ground irrigation system, whether or not it has controllers and things of that nature, which I'll talk a bit more about later on. And so all of this makes it very difficult for water utilities to plan conservation programs and know what types of savings they'll achieve. So we decided this is something we really need to undertake. So we started our Outdoor Water Savings Research Initiative, and in 2015, we conducted a study that looked at the published research and what's available so we could identify some needs based on the gaps in the research. And then in phase 2, we did a peak day water demand management study that we released in 2017. And then just about a year ago, on Valentine's Day 2019, we released our landscape transformation study. And that's what I'm going to talk about most today. And then just about a month ago, we launched our drought restriction study. And I will talk about that as well. So we have kind of a quartet of major studies that we undertook with some additional things that were going along with it. So the peak day water demand management study was kind of interesting. We tested the remote control of irrigation systems to manage peak day demand. So some days when it's really hot and dry, everybody turns on their irrigation systems, puts a lot of pressure on the system, and it may start to exceed the peak or put a lot of pressure on a water system. So we worked with New Jersey American Water, a company called Rachio, which makes smart controllers, Water Demand Management, which is a research firm, and the Alliance for Water Efficiency to look if the water utility could take control over residential irrigation systems and turn them off during times of these heavy peak events. A fun fact about this study is that it took place in Bruce Springsteen's neighborhood in New Jersey, and it included 15 sites. So this was kind of an experiment, but it was successful. 14 of the 15 households that participated, this peak shaving experiment worked, where the water utility was able to override the system and turn off their irrigation system to lower that peak and shift it. So those homes ultimately ended up irrigating their lawns, just not at that specific time. One homeowner did override the settings and decided they didn't want to participate. But largely it was a success, and it kind of just shows what technology is here, but also what's around the corner in terms of technology related to irrigation controllers. So our landscape transformation study was a huge undertaking, and it had two primary components. First, we wanted to look at the range of savings that can be expected from conservation programs that target outdoor irrigation. And this was one of the gaps in the research is, when a water utility is planning a program like this, there wasn't a lot out there to look at what types of savings have been achieved from these programs. So we really wanted to look into that. And then we also looked into customer motivations for changing their landscape as well as market readiness. We had a great research team, A&N Technical Services, Marine or Besnick, and Sligo Creek Resources We also had Peter Mayer, who's one of our technical advisors, and then AWE staff supporting it as well. And so the research team are some of the foremost experts and economists when it comes to water, and we're able to really evaluate these savings and find out if they were statistically significant. We had a great number of partners and participants in this study. So here are a number of water providers that contributed data from their programs as well as funding for this project. And I also have to give a shout out to the Scott's Miracle Grow Foundation, as this project would not have been possible without their support. So we were very grateful for all these project partners. So landscape transformation is the term we used through this project, and it simply means the act of a customer transitioning from a high water using landscape and how it's designed and switching over either to a new design, kind of like you see here in these pictures where a lot of the turf has been removed and replaced with climate appropriate plants, or maybe just switching to irrigation equipment that's more efficient. Things like efficient sprinkler heads or drip irrigation or soil moisture sensors, so the irrigation system only runs when it needs it, rather than just being set to a timer and running when it's raining out or something of that nature. So we want to see a shift to sustainable landscapes and have that transformation to efficiency and sustainability. There are many motivations to undertake a landscape transformation program for a community. And here are a number of those different motivations. And I'm not going to read through the list, but at the top are water supply issues and water supply reliability. Or, growth may be causing expansion of a supply or capacity. And conserving water outdoors can really help with those issues. As I noted earlier, it's really that peak season that drives our capacity need. And so reducing water during the peak is very important. So our impact analysis looked at 4 distinct different types of programs in 9 different locations. And so we looked at rebates for efficient irrigation technology like smart controllers, things like soil moisture sensors or weather-based irrigation controllers, free distribution of mulch, and then also customer site visits and educating customers about their water use, how they can reduce it. And then we also looked at several turf removal and re-landscaping programs. Those types of programs have been very popular recently in areas that are experiencing drought, which in recent years has been fairly common. So those are the types of programs we looked at. And interestingly, all programs generated meaningful water savings. Even the free mulch program had savings. The average had a pretty big range, 7% to 39%. So outreach and support garnered on average 7% savings, where turf removal programs average 39% savings. So that's a very large reduction in a homeowner's water use throughout a year. And then kind of something that might seem obvious but was still nice to see the numbers prove is the high water users are where you're going to get most of your savings. So if you are going to design programs like this, if you find the customers who have a lot of water use already, you'll likely get much more savings by targeting those customers. And that's, something very interesting about outdoor water conservation programs is there is potential to give a customer that is deficit irrigating from a theoretical standpoint. If you give them a smart controller, their water use could go up, because if they're not irrigating their lawn enough, the smart controller, say it's a soil moisture sensor, may end up increasing their water use a little bit so their lawn is properly watered. So it's just kind of an interesting dynamic we've seen. So here are a few examples from our case studies of the savings and different types of programs. So Austin Water had a turf removal program, and their customers saved an average of nearly 19%, which was very significant. And then over to the right, Petaluma, they were one of the communities that had mulch distribution. So they gave out free mulch. They called it Mulch Madness. I'm sure that name didn't hurt participation. It was kind of catchy. But they saw an average savings from their participants of 13%, which I personally was really blown away by. I thought that was a great amount of savings for something like free distribution of mulch. And then San Diego County Water Authority, which serves a huge population of over 3 million people, they had a combination of approaches, including education, technology rebates, and technical assistance, where they went out and did site visits. And they saw huge savings of essentially 35% on average per participant, which equated to about 42,000 gallons per year per participant. And then, just to put that in different terms, that 42,000 gallons would meet the needs of a 4-person household for about 100 days in the San Diego region. And just to, kind of backtrack a little, when it comes to water utilities and their conservation efforts, it's very common to give financial incentives, say for an efficient toilet or clothes washer, or things like irrigation controllers. So that's kind of following a fairly typical script for water utilities that want to encourage conservation. Another great finding of this study was that these landscape programs did effectively reduce peak demand. And so that's great to know, because those peak savings have a lot of value because they can help us avoid the need to expand our water system, which is great. And so it did show that peak season reduction. Another thing that was really interesting is that the water savings from these programs were shown to persist and even increase over time. And so the chart on the right is from the Southern Nevada Water Authority, and they had enough data where, their program's been going on since 1999. And so we could really go back in time and see, are these savings from the participants persisting over time? When you're planning a conservation program and investing money in efficiency, you want to know, how many years am I going to get out of this for my investment? And here we're showing it's a very good number of years, and your savings can even increase. Now the reason for that increase, because it made me scratch my head when I saw it, is when you do a landscape transformation and you're replacing the turf, say with local plants that are native and don't require a lot of irrigation, they may need a decent amount of water on those beginning years just to get established. But as those plants, shrubs, bushes, trees get established, they won't require as much supplemental irrigation in the future. So that is part of what explains that increase in savings over time. And so that was the impact analysis looking at savings, and the findings were very encouraging. We saw significant and meaningful savings. We saw the peak season demand reduced, and we saw persistence of those savings. Then we turned our attention to the market analysis and surveyed 3,400 essentially customers throughout North America. This included United States and a couple locations in Canada. And about half of those that were surveyed had participated in a landscape transformation program, so they were familiar with this topic. And then we also talked with supply chain folks and looked at industry reports to get an idea of the market. And we learned several things. It's time to educate customers is one. 53% of the respondents think they use 10 to 30% of their water outdoors, when it's really more like 30 to 60%. It really depends where you live and what your your lot size is, and like I said, it's very variable. But that chart I showed from Los Angeles was 54%. There was a big study in 2016 called the Residential End Uses of Water Study. It found 50% of water was used outdoors, so it's a lot, and most customers don't know that. So it's time to educate about that. We also saw some misperceptions about the efficiency of the sprinklers that they own, um, and then whether or not they have a smart controller. And if they do have an irrigation system with a timer, which 92% said they had, only 25% said they adjusted it based on season and weather, which means those, 25% isn't a lot. That means 75% of those systems are just running automatically. And if they're not being adjusted for season or weather, they're likely watering when water isn't needed. So we want to stay on top of that, educate customers, because a lot of these things are unknown and not clear. It's not a fault of their own. We also found out that customers want landscapes that are beautiful and something they can be proud of, but also easy to maintain. I know myself, I enjoy working out in the yard, but I don't want to spend every Saturday laboring out in my yard. Even though I do enjoy it, there are other things I want to do. So it is, a priority to make them easy to care for. But a lot of the respondents, 42%, put water efficiency in the top 3 priorities for their lawn. So we do think there's interest, and we see interest in having a landscape that is low water using. And so we also asked what beauty meant to them, and it wasn't just turf, which typically uses quite a bit of water. They wanted other things like trees and shrubs, entertainment space, flowers, and of course lawn, and especially functional lawn. I know when I grew up, a lot of my best memories were playing soccer and football in our lawn. So we're definitely not opposed to turf, but it is time to water it efficiently. We found most customers are not fully satisfied with their current landscape, and so this fits in very well with trying to transform the market and the way we landscape our yards. And one of the important things we find is that these customers say they need some assistance to change their yards and make them more efficient. 85%, in fact, said they would need moderate to full assistance to change out their landscape. 45% said they'd need a financial incentive, which is, as I mentioned earlier, fairly common for water utilities to provide, but, a good number of people said they'd need that to go ahead and do it. And then, things like design and plant selection, people need help with too. It's not an easy thing to undertake. It can be daunting. So water utilities and other groups, like conservation districts, can play a role here in educating customers, leading them to resources that can help them with this process. What was great to hear is when customers transform their landscapes, they seem to be very happy with the results. 91% said they were satisfied or very satisfied with their new landscape. 85% thought it was worth it in terms of their investment, and 63% said they would not do anything differently. I don't know if I've ever undertaken any kind of project and could say I wouldn't do anything differently. So to me, that 63% is a pretty high number, and very encouraging news. People undertake this and they're happy with the results. But we wanted to see what some of the barriers are. For customers, high costs. I mentioned that lack of knowledge and misperception about outdoor water use, concerns about how the new landscape might look. There can be a lot of pressure in neighborhoods about our landscapes and keeping them looking nice. So we're talking, about a huge cultural shift here in many ways in terms of how our landscapes are set up and what people value as important, as attractive, as a status symbol when it comes to their landscape. And then on the utility program side, we noted that there were a lot of complicated requirements to participate in the program, which would make it hard for a customer to get plugged into that. And the financial incentives weren't always uh, very large compared to the total project cost. So if you're, giving someone a rebate for a toilet, it may pay for the toilet, or a clothes washer, it may pay for half of it. But with a landscape, it may be hard to cover a large percentage of the project. And then, for the folks implementing these programs, they're much more complex than, say, just processing a rebate for a product, because there's a lot going on with landscape water use. And then on the supply chain side of things, it can be hard to find efficient products. There are testing and certifications like WaterSense labels, irrigation controllers, but there isn't as much going on in terms of certifications and regulation as there is with fixtures and appliances like toilets, shower heads, and clothes washers. And then the contractor base is a huge thing here, that we as an industry need to plug into and make sure they've got the knowledge and the motivation to promote sustainable landscapes. So some of the recommendations go in line with the barriers, and that's just to correct misperceptions about water use and educate the customers, connect better with the supply chain industry, meaning, the water efficiency and conservation community needs to create a better dialogue and connect, promote things like testing and certification and labeling like WaterSense, improve plant availability at nurseries and stores. And then with the contractors, again, making that connection, lead with technology, and get that segment of the market motivated around sustainable landscapes and water efficiency. Kind of looking at the long game here of landscape transformation, what I've been talking about essentially is water utilities providing incentives to their customers to change out their landscapes. We want to get to a place where those incentives aren't even required. We want to get to a place where sustainable landscapes have been adopted. Say, 5 houses in a neighborhood go through this process, and all the other neighbors envy their landscapes and decide that's what they want to move toward. So we're in maybe the phase where we're putting in a lot of effort to promote this as an industry, but the long game is to change the market, change the way we landscape our yards. And I've mentioned shower heads, toilets, and clothes washers, and that's kind of an area where this has occurred. If you go to a big box store to buy a toilet nowadays, right now the federal regulation requires 1.6 gallons per flush for a toilet, but most of the toilets you're going to see at the store are 1.28 gallons per flush, which is a high efficiency toilet, so beyond what the national standard is. And that's largely because the market has fully transformed. That's where the competition is among companies. They want the WaterSense label. They want that efficiency. That's what customers want. And so when you go to a store, you almost have to seek out a 1.6. So if you want to learn more about this project, we have a number of resources out on our website. Deb mentioned the slides will be in PDF. You can click on this link. There's an executive summary that I would encourage you to start with. It really summarizes both reports quite well. Both of these reports are large, but there is an impact analysis report looking at the savings, as well as the process evaluation, which looks at the market and changing over. There's also a fact sheet and a really cool infographic. The two reports do have member versions, so if you are a member of AWE, there's some added program descriptions in the report, and then we have a fact sheet that is for our members as well that breaks down the findings from the impact analysis. And then building off of this, we mentioned some of the barriers around water utility program design to generate programs that attract customers and generate savings. So we took the findings from this study and generated our Sustainable Landscape Program Guide for water utilities. And this is a great document that is for water utilities who maybe are just getting started on this, or those who are looking to make some improvements to the programs that they already have in place. And so it has two main sections. One is general considerations for outdoor programs, and then it gets into considerations for specific types of landscape programs, so the different things I've mentioned today. And it also has some program examples. There's 5 of them from different water utilities throughout the country. And it gives examples of what they've done, the savings they've achieved, and maybe most importantly, lessons learned. There are some great quotes in there from some of the leaders in this industry, and really it's very valuable. So we launched that last June, and we sent printed copies to all our members and also have electronic copies available for members. And again, this was solely funded by the Scott's Miracle-Gro Foundation and would not have been done without their support. So I'm running a bit short on time, but I do want to go over what we just launched, which is our drought restriction study. And I'm going to kind of breeze through these slides a bit, but I want to give an overview. So a lot of water providers throughout the country have water shortage contingency plans or drought plans, and when they're facing a water shortage due to things like hot and dry weather, they will ask their customers to use less water, and in some cases they make those drought restrictions mandatory. So they'll start out by asking their customers to use less water, and then they'll actually make it mandatory, say that they can only water twice a week or water their lawns once a week. And that generates savings and helps them deal with the drought. So we undertook a very large study to look at the impact of drought restrictions. And here are some of the questions we looked at. We really wanted to know, what are the impacts of these restrictions? And that is essentially the gap in the research and the resources that are out there that we wanted to fill. There are some great resources and guidance documents from AWWA, which is the American Water Works Association. They've got a manual that will help you plan for drought, and the National Drought Mitigation Center is a wonderful resource. And there are some other resources about historic drought, but what we put out is, to my knowledge, the largest study of its kind. It looked at 11 different cases, water providers, and got very detailed into the impact of the drought and the restrictions. So it's a very detailed analysis. It's a very large report, about 200 pages, and it's just very thorough. Again, we had wonderful project partners, retail agencies, regional agencies, folks that provided data and funding. And then we had partner funding support from the Scott's Miracle-Gro Foundation again. Just, hugely supported this important project and made it possible. So I wanted to show an example of what might be found in a typical water shortage contingency plan. And so this is from Santa Cruz. That was one of the participants. And they've got 5 stages of drought in their plan, and these stages are triggered based on their water supply conditions. They have a reservoir, I believe, so their reservoir levels and their forecast of what's coming into their reservoir may trigger a certain stage. And then each stage has a goal for how much water they want to save, expressed as a percentage. And then they'll have measures that go along with that. So stage 2 may have, they may decide they're going to ask their customers to water only twice a week. Stage 3 could be once a week, and it progressively gets more strict in terms of what water can be used. So we found in the case studies that they were able to successfully reduce their demand. On an annual basis, it was from 18 to 30%, which when you think about it is a huge reduction in a water utilities usage, and then peak monthly demand by 20 to 42%. One thing that was very interesting is that voluntary measures, just asking your customers to use less water, did not generate statistically significant savings. That was a very interesting finding from my perspective. And also, none of these water providers reached their final stage in their drought plan, which was great news and a great finding because a lot of these water utilities in California and Texas were facing very serious droughts. And so I wanted to show you this to illustrate the type of detail and things that are in the report. So these two charts are showing gallons per capita day water usage for Los Angeles. And here we're looking at annual gallons per capita per day all the way back to 1970. These orange bars are showing periods of drought. You can see these huge declines in water use. And you can also see that the trend over time is downward. And that's for a variety of reasons. They've had a lot of active conservation. There are plumbing codes and standards that I've mentioned. Pricing of water has changed. So the trend is down. But then also the report includes these monthly charts where the authors really dug into the data to see, what's happening here, not just with the restrictions, but what's going on with the weather and other drivers of demand. We wanted to know what the longevity of these savings is. And one of the interesting things I alluded to in the last slide is that the overall trend is down. So if you're in a drought and say it lasts 2 years and you've got restrictions in place and your demand has been driven down, your water use isn't going to necessarily bounce back to where it was because the overall trend is going down. So that can impact utilities revenue, and it's something people are interested in terms of what to expect if they have to ask their customers or require their customers to use less water. And so to maximize the effectiveness of your drought restrictions, you really need to plan ahead, and also communicate. The water provider is an incredibly important source of information. Also, do not rely on voluntary measures. And so this slide has a lot going on, and I probably erred on the side of having too much content today, so you can go back and look at slides. One of the things I want to draw to here, since I'm running a bit short on time, is to be effective, your plan needs to have codified rulemaking so that you have enforceable things. If you're requiring your customers to use less water, it's very important that you can have some type of enforcement mechanism, whether it be a fine, a surcharge, or something. But if you're asking your customers to water 1 day a week and you have a customer that's watering every day, there has to be a hook or something to get them to stop. And that's something we noted in the research, is that was a critical piece that you have to be able to enforce. Now, I mentioned before a drought or water shortage, you need to have a plan in place for what you're going to do. The time is not right when you're already in it to make a plan. And you need to make sure you have things you can enforce, and you need to educate the community. Particularly if you're drought prone, education ahead of time even is great, but it is important to have all your plans in place so when a drought hits, you have a plan of action you can follow. And then during it, again, communication is critical. If you need to adopt surcharges to increase your rates, that's one of the most effective tools for getting compliance with your restrictions. And it's very important to do that without delay. You also have to stay on top of things. One water provider noted that their messaging was so effective that people weren't watering their lawns because of the drought. They started to see a lot of tree mortality. So people were not watering their lawns, their trees weren't getting enough water, and so they kind of had to change their messaging and say, hey, y'all are doing a great job, but you can water your trees. We don't want our community to lose all their trees. So you have to stay on top of things, stay nimble, and communicate. And when it's over, you need to announce that it's over and thank the public for their efforts in helping the community cope with the drought. And then, monitor things as you go. Note if the demand is coming back or not to be what it was before the drought. So I kind of went through those quickly. If you want to learn more about this study, the full report is available to AWE members, but there's a great executive summary that's publicly available. It's out on our website. There's also a press release with some details. And then I included a lot of information in these slides that I didn't have time to cover if you'd like to look at those for more detail. So what can conservation districts do related to what I just talked about for 40 minutes? First and foremost, make local water providers and governments a partner. Recognize that outdoor water use and drought preparedness are priorities. And then create an understanding of local situations. Every area is unique and different, but there are opportunities for outdoor water use and conservation and efficiency. And then create an understanding of local water systems' vulnerabilities to drought, and then identify those opportunities to improve drought preparedness. Make sure your communities have a plan in place should a drought occur. So those are just some ideas of what could be done. And I would be happy, to take any questions now, or there's my email address as well if you'd like to follow up with me another time with any questions about what I talked about. And so I guess now, Deb, we can take questions if there are any.
I'm going to switch over, and we'll have Bill's contact information up again. Right now, I've switched it over to the chat room so that our participants who are muted can type in any questions or comments. And while we wait to see if we have any, I have a couple of thoughts to share and maybe a question or two, Bill. First of all, I think this was great information, both for helping our members in our conservation districts to understand the customers out there, the homeowners with their landscapes and HOAs and communities, to help understand what their perspectives are on outdoor water use. And then also for encouraging or helping our folks to be thinking about working with water utilities if they don't already. I think there's some really neat opportunity there for partnerships. Districts are not enforcement entities, but they're real strong on working with individuals, with communities, and helping them understand what they can change and providing technical assistance in doing that. So what you've shared here with these studies you've done and what AWE is doing on different things, I think is really valuable for our folks, and I thank you for that. We've got some that have come in, so I'll put a hold on my questions here. From Shala, we have, is this something that has been given to individual cities and towns? So your reports, your studies on that, Bill, how are you guys distributing that?
Yeah, a number of local governments and water utilities and other professionals such as consultants have obtained these studies. So yeah, individual cities and towns have access to this information. There were a number of communities that were eagerly awaiting the results because it helps them plan and justify their investments in future projects. So the short answer is yes. We distribute this through our website primarily. We have an email just distribution list where we'll notify people of things we publish and release, and then we're always going out to conferences and events and talking about our research. So we try to get it out there as much as possible. And something I should have included in the slides is a link to sign up for our email distribution list. But if you visit our website, there is a link that you can find there.
Okay. And so from Heather, well, first of all, when you're answering Heather's question after I read it here, I'm going to then move the slide your contact information so people will have that.
Great.
So from Heather, we have, for communities implementing landscape transformation programs, how would a municipality track and measure the amount of water saved over time? Some municipalities do not meter their irrigation water separately from household use.
This is a wonderful question, and it is very difficult to measure the impact of these programs because that irrigation water isn't metered. And even, I guess I'd go as far to say, even if it was metered, it would still be a bit challenging to measure that impact. And the reason for that is because there's a lot of things at play outside of your intervention or your landscape transformation, and that's weather. So that's part of why the landscape transformation impact analysis was such a big deal, and there was such a big gap in this area, is there's not a lot of information on savings because the analysis to do it is very technical and requires, statistical analyses to isolate things and normalize water use for weather and things of that nature. So that's, precisely why we took on this project. And even, the drought restriction study, the savings from those restrictions were estimated using very robust statistical models, and they're fully described in the reports. So I would encourage anyone who likes statistics to pick up a copy of those reports, or even if you don't, I encourage you to pick them up. But if you like stats, you'll find some really neat equations and calculations there to estimate the savings. So, that is something we're working on as well, is developing, protocols people can use to evaluate and measure their programs, because it can be a very daunting task, especially for folks who aren't inclined to do that type of analysis.
Okay.
So I'm not sure if I fully answered that, but there are ways to do it.
If Heather has follow-up questions, she's welcome to either go ahead and type them in or follow up with you individually.
Absolutely.
I'm going to take one more question here, and then we'll do a wrap-up, as I know one of our, Carol, I believe, had to leave at the hour here. So from Selco, do you know of any study that looks at rain barrel use or rainwater harvesting within communities, or the use of rain gardens and earthworks to use less municipal water supply?
There have been some looks at that for sure, and there are water utilities that distribute free rain barrels to their customers to promote that. It gets a little tricky because it requires, depending on the type of rain barrel or cistern being used, it requires the homeowner, to capture that water, but then use it at a time when they'd otherwise would have irrigated with potable water, drinking water. I'm not necessarily aware of a study I could point you to. We do, if you're interested in this topic, we have a tool that's related to new development and estimating water use and offsets, and it has a very sophisticated model that can predict water savings from rainwater harvesting, and I'd be happy to point you to that if you send me an email. And if you also send me an email, I'd be happy to peek around for studies about rain barrels, and where I think you're likely to find more information are probably presentations from conferences where people talk about their rain barrel programs. But I don't know of a study that like has a specific savings, and it will vary a lot based on your location, the amount of rain you get, your irrigation requirement, and then it will also vary quite a bit year to year in terms of what you're actually going to be able to capture.
All
So
right.
I'd be happy to look into that if you send me an email.
All right. Well, thank you, Bill. We're at the hour here, so I'm going to go ahead and switch it to the closing slides. And while that's happening, I want to say a huge thank you to Carol and Bill. Carol, thank you very much for making this connection for us with Bill and the Alliance for Water Efficiency and for Scott's ongoing support. And Bill, thank you. Oh, go ahead, Carol.
Oh, just going to say you're very welcome. It's awesome to see the collaboration that's taking place.
Very much so, yep. And Bill, thank you for this great information. And knowing that these reports are available on AWE's website is good to know. And folks can check into what membership is about there.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for the opportunity to talk today. And we'd love to connect with the conservation districts. We really appreciate what you all are doing.
Great. We'll definitely keep that conversation going then. And for our participants, just a quick reminder about what some resources we do have available on our website. And also, as usual, as I mentioned, our Facebook page. If you have something you'd like to share with folks, please, send me a one-line item and a photo, and we'll get that posted for you. And be sure to check it out to see what we post up there 2 or 3 times a week. And then finally, I invite everyone to join us next month on March 19th for a look at land management certification programs in Michigan and in Maine. And so with that, thank you everyone, to our speakers and our participants.